Hi, I'm Allison, and this is Nellie. We live part-time in this tiny camper. This time we're going off the grid for a long holiday weekend, hiking and mushroom hunting our way across the North Cascades and deep into a burned forest out the other side. Our weekend starts in downtown Seattle, but quickly moves a couple hours away to State Highway 20 through the Cascades Pass. We've driven this road a lot of times together to go on all kinds of hikes, including Maple Pass and Cutthroat Pass. Our first stop today is the Eastbank trailhead, which is like 10 minutes down the road from where we launched our paddleboard on Diablo Lake with Nellie last year. Well, this is about as messy as this gets. And this is about gazoon tight. This is about as much stuff as I have ever crammed in here because I am packed for my week at work that I just finished, but I'm also packed for the trail, 4 days of hiking. So there's just a lot of stuff. Let's clean that up, huh? What? You mind? We should make our bed too. Don't get too comfortable. Nellie. Stop. Highway's gonna get real quiet in a bit. Then all we'll hear is that river. Shh. Something out there. No. What? I'm trying to listen to the river here. That's a rock. There's a rock out there. It's just a boulder, you dummy. Can we go back to listening to the river now? After a long drive, a little cleanup, and a snack, it's time for a good night's sleep so we can hit the trail first thing in the morning. The Eastbank Trail was also Nellie's first ever hike. We covered about 5 miles that day, walking to the Hidden Hand campground and back, with me carrying her most of the way. Today we're setting our sights just a little further down the trail, a 9-mile round trip to the Hidden Hand Pass area to check out one of my more reliable mushroom spots. And she'll be carrying herself the whole way. This isn't the most thrilling, scenic, or particularly challenging trail, especially compared to those I've shown you further down the highway. But it is a gateway to hiking around Ross Lake, which runs all the way up to and across the Canadian border. One day we'll take a proper backpacking trip back here and really cover some miles, but for today, we're content to stay with a casual stroll in the early morning. You'll have the company of at least the sound of Ruby Creek for the first couple miles until you reach the trail junction. You can continue straight to the first campground and the waterfront, where the trail is mostly flat and we have lots of fond memories. If you take any of the other options, those involve a bit more of an incline. Unfortunately, a few miles away, one of my more beloved butt-kicking hikes is still closed a couple years after parts of it burned in a wildfire. That's Sourdough Mountain. Maybe one day we'll meet up again. Actually, the last time I attempted this hike was a couple years ago while it was actively burning. We turned back quickly when smoke came visibly rolling down the hill. And I mean it when I talk about attempts. Out of several attempts, I've only made it to the top twice, and once it was raining and fogged in at the summit. But I spotted a nearly totally white piebald deer that day, so that was kind of a cool consolation prize, I guess. Anyway, what the first several miles of this trail lacks in views, it sometimes makes up for in mushrooms. And that's why I like to come check up on it when I'm in the area. Eventually I made it to Hidden Hand Pass and didn't find as many mushrooms as I was hoping for, but I suddenly had this eerie feeling I was being watched. And I was getting kind of hungry anyway, so I decided it was time to go back quickly and move on to our next stop. A couple weeks later, a trail nearby would be closed due to cougar activity, so my feeling of being watched may not have been the early morning caffeine jitters after all.
What? No. Are you okay?
Well, after Nellie got that out of her system, we headed to my favorite part of this drive, the Washington Pass area. There's a nice hairpin turn in the highway with a view of the early winter spires, a much-loved climbing destination. Not much further down the road, I realized I need to stop in a town to get some more dog food. Nellie would never let me hear the end of it if I had to cut her rations for the weekend, even by a single kibble. I think she would notice. So we make the briefest of brief trips into Winthrop before backtracking a few minutes and leaving the pavement for the next couple days. It's nothing against Winthrop, it just has the kind of traffic on a Saturday that I usually try to avoid. That's better. The old logging forest and fire access roads that zigzag the burned mountains around Okanagan County are a go-to when I just want to take a drive in the woods and futz around, look for mushrooms or see wildflowers, of which it was nearing peak season. Because the climate here is extremely dry in the summer, unfortunately that means it catches on fire a lot. Some of the forests you're seeing in this video have burned multiple times in the past couple decades, and some recently as just last year. This makes for a unique ecosystem ripe for Morel mushroom hunting, and cleared of all underbrush you can see plants, animals, and other neat stuff that's usually hidden in your typical unburned forest. So this is a wild thing that happens. Even though the tree has burned and toppled, the roots keep burning, and sometimes they make nice little homes for critters. Of course, all this destruction comes with the risk of weird road conditions and down trees, but in all my years, I have yet to encounter anything out here a winter a chainsaw couldn't overcome. Nice. In fact, back in 2020, when the trail systems were closed, I used to come out this way, drive aimlessly, wander into the woods, throw rocks, yell into the void, whatever. It feels pretty safe since you can see your vehicle, a bear, and everything else such a long way off. It was wandering out here 5 years ago now where I got the idea to buy my tiny trailer. And it was out here that I encountered my first trails that made me want to buy a Jeep. So, we're old friends, the Okanagan Fire District and I. Well, that was to be expected, I guess. I parked at a very scenic trailhead for the night. Hiker hungry from the morning's adventures and feeling really lucky I had the whole place to myself for the night, it was time for a camping tradition of mine: nachos. Well, we weren't all alone for the night. We did have some after-dinner guests scrounging around the campsite for a while, but they seemed chill enough to stay. Well, we kept our distance, of course. Well, that was a dead quiet night and a real solid night of sleep. I took a short wander in the woods around my camp the next morning, but the real goal of this day was to backtrack to the Buck Lake area we passed on our way up here and scrounge around a few of my usual morel hunting spots to see what's growing back there. Now you might be wondering how or why or what on earth would be growing where the soil's been scorched like this. For a lot of plants, it's the destruction of other competing plants and light-blocking underbrush that causes such a wildflower rush. But when it comes to my object of interest, the mushrooms, especially the morels, that's still kind of up for debate. It's probably a combination of factors from the change in soil chemistry and temperature, removing the thick pine needle layer that can block them from growing, and probably some wacky stuff going on with their mycorrhizal relationships with the trees, and who knows. Google mycorrhiza if you want some truly wild reading material, by the way. Anyway, the effect of the fires on the morels is rare enough that you can only find them in a few grocery stores for maybe a couple weeks a year for well over $50 a pound. That is if you don't pick them yourself. So you also find stiff competition for foraging spots. The only conflict most people have to worry about, though, is whether this rather lucrative delicacy conflicts with their stomach. Not only are there some false morel types that can cause stomach upset or more life-threatening symptoms, but as I have found in the past, if you eat too many real actual morels in one sitting, which to me dried morels kind of taste like mild jerky, you might also have a reaction. In my case, it was a few hours of throwing up. These days, I prefer to admire them safely behind a camera lens, or in the very, very rare risotto. Another word of caution. It's really common to run into other mushroom hunters here who are armed. And it's not to defend their territory, it's to defend themselves against bears. This is bear country. So consider carrying bear spray and maybe carrying on a loud conversation with anyone nearby. Or your dog or yourself. You're at a much greater risk of a run-in with a bear when you're heads down and silent in a harvesting frenzy. I know this from personal experience picking huckleberries in eastern Washington. Today we found neither bears nor morels, but we did find a mushroom that I see growing near morels very often, so this is a very good sign that I should come back again. If you're looking for a greater guarantee of success than I've had, though, you'll want to venture out in the earlier spring months to a spot that just burned the previous summer for a true bumper crop. Not an older burn area like this. Although I still find morels here often enough to keep coming back. So after coming up short and really, really sweaty at Buck Lake, we continued on a different forest road nearby until the end of the line and once again found the place empty of both traffic and campers. I did pass by a couple really large RV caravans, but after about 10 miles, I saw no one. I was intrigued by the trail that allegedly goes up into the mountains you see out there, but it turned out that the trailhead would be the most enjoyable part of that experience, as this trail has not been cleaned up from the last fire. Actually, when I was out here last, this road was closed this far back, so maybe one day I'll get a little further on foot than a mile. I just had a feeling that climbing over hundreds and hundreds of down trees would get me nowhere but annoyed and probably lost. For a quicker, more accessible campout, you might like any of the myriad dispersed campsites in the lower elevations of the Chewuk River nearby. At any time not during a holiday weekend, they're generally not that packed. And for a hike with a view that isn't covered in timber, I've previously shown you the Goat Peak Lookout Trail a little way up the highway. We didn't attempt it this trip because there's still a little too much snow on the road for me to get up there comfortably with my camper. But it'll be worth it when I can again, just to see the scenic toilet, to say nothing of the actual lookout. So thanks for joining us on this most marginally unsuccessful mushroom scouting trip. and really quite successful trailhead camping trip. And please, please, for the love of God, don't eat anything growing out of the ground that you can't 100% positively identify.